All right, so last time we did a buyer's guide to used graphics cards, and this time we're gonna do a buyer's guide to new or used computers. So the first thing you do when you're looking at, buying a used computer, say you're there, you're at the listing, you're looking at the machine you want to buy, ask the guy if you can plug it in, turn it on. So once you plug it in, don't turn it on just yet. Make sure, look at the machine, make sure all the parts are in the right spot. Make sure all the cables are plugged in correctly. Make sure you have all the right parts as far as you can say. If they say you have a 850 watt power supply in the listing and you show up and there's a 500 watt power supply, they're probably not an honest seller. Don't buy from them. If they say, that the machine's got an RTX 3080 in it and you show up and it says GeForce GTX on the machine, well, that's definitely not a 3080, so I don't think you want to buy that. Go around to the other side of the system. Open up the backside panel. Make sure that, if it wants to open, there we go. Open up the backside panel. Make sure that you have the correct number of storage drives. You're probably not going to be able to see them all or see the model numbers on all of them, but make sure that you have the right number of them. If you have NVMe drives around the front on the motherboard, a lot of the times they're under heat sinks or under the graphics cards themselves, so you're going to have a harder time seeing them. If you were advertised to have 16 gigs of RAM, you would much rather have two 8 gig sticks as opposed to one 16 gig stick in single channel. And if you have two sticks, make sure that they're in the correct operation or they're in the correct slots. And 9 times out of 10, that's the slot closest to the CPU and the one slot over. So, or I'm sorry, not the one closest to it, but typically it's the one right next to it and then the one furthest away. And that's what you do. Next thing you do, you go ahead and turn on the system. Make sure that all of your fans are spinning. And typically on newer graphics cards, you're going to have a 0 RPM mode on your graphics card, so that fan might not spin. But your CPU fans and your case fans should all spin. And while you're looking at the machine, if you notice an excessive amount of dust, as in excessive enough to make sure, to prevent fans from spinning, that's a problem. You really don't want to deal with that machine. If that machine is, dirty enough that the fans aren't, the fans of the machine aren't spinning, you don't know how long the machine has been like that. If you've got a broken fan, you don't know how long the machine has been running with a broken fan. Like 1 out of 3 front case fans, one of them being broken, that's not a huge deal. But if you've got a CPU fan broken, that's a big deal. You don't know how long that's been broken. Again, I wouldn't recommend buying the machine. So now that we have the machine up and on properly, there's a few things I like to do. If you go to the search bar, you can search for your device manager. Under display adapters, it'll tell you what the system thinks the graphics card is. So in this case, I've got a 2070 Super in here. And if you go down to processors, that'll tell you what processor you have and if all of your cores are registering. So the i3-12100F is a quad-core processor with hyperthreading, so it shows up as an 8-core. That's also another good way to make sure hyperthreading is working properly. And then I'd like to go to My PC, if I can type right. If you go to My PC, it'll tell you how much RAM you have installed, and again, it'll list out other system info, make sure you've got the right Windows license and all that stuff. Now that you've got the machine up and running, everything looks fine. If you can, download and run a benchmarking utility, especially if you're buying it from, an eBay seller. Run a benchmark utility, make sure that your benchmark is within roughly what you would expect it to be for the system spec that you have. If you can use 3D Mark, that's an excellent one because it records scores and weights them against other system scores. But 3D Mark is paid. The Unigine benchmarks are not paid, so you can use them for free. Another thing I like to do is use Cinebench. If you run Cinebench on the CPU, it'll tell you if the CPU is operating correctly. You can also run a Cinebench stress test to make sure the CPU isn't overheating. If the CPU is overheating, that's either A, a sign of poor cooling, or B, a sign of the CPU is getting ready to die. More likely than not, it's just poor cooling, but if the system has been running with poor cooling for long enough, you don't really want to deal with that. Hi, this is Post Joe, and real quick, I forgot to mention that it's always a good idea to do a fresh install of Windows on your new used PC whenever you get it, even if the seller already did. And I'll have a guide below if you need help doing that. One of the things I'll do while I've still got the system on is I'll take a little USB stick and just plug it into all of the USB ports. Make sure that they work. A broken USB port, especially on the motherboard side, is indicative of, something dying in the motherboard, because if you have a dead USB port, yeah, that might just be a dead USB port. That could also be, hey, the machine is getting ready to kick the bucket. And if you're buying a used machine, you don't know which one it is. The seller might not be 100% honest with you. And the best thing you have, especially when buying online, to tell if somebody's being honest or not, is buyer reviews. If they have a ton of buyer reviews and they're all positive, that's probably a good thing. But say you've turned on the machine, it's not horrendously dirty, you've ran your benchmarks, everything's where they're supposed to be, you're getting what you're supposed to be getting, and everything on the machine works, you should be good to go. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, found it useful. If you did, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one, and we will be doing buyer's guides for the rest of the system components. And I'll see you guys in those videos.